So this article is from Anna. So the role of age, prejudice, and trust in building peace between communities, evidence from Cyprus. So the authors hypothesized a couple different things. So the first one is that more quality and quantity of contact will be positively related to a willingness for renewed cohabitation between the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots. The second hypothesis has two parts. So one is that trust will mediate the relationship between quantity and quality of contact and willingness for renewed cohabitation, and that prejudice will mediate the relationship between quantity and quality of contact and willingness to integrate with the other community. And the third hypothesis is that the direct and indirect effects of quantity and quality of contact are expected to vary across age, so that older Turkish Cypriots and younger Greek Cypriots will benefit more from contact compared to youngish Turkish Cypriots and older Greek Cypriots. So essentially trying to mediate this protracted conflict between two sides in the community. So the methods, how this was collected, is that they had a sample of 502 Greek Cypriots and 504 Turkish Cypriots, and they did a telephone survey, and they were asked to rate their agreement with two statements. One, I feel that I can live together with Greek Cypriots or Turkish Cypriots. And the other is, I would not mind having Greek Cypriots or Turkish Cypriots as neighbors. Trust was measured with the Bremen-Ron's trust scale. So asking the question, would you say that most Greek Cypriots or Turkish Cypriots can be trusted? And then prejudice was measured by basically asking about the warm feelings one side has towards the outgroup from a scale of 1 to 11, 1 being 0 degrees, 11 being 100 degrees. And for the results, so the sample, the Turkish Cypriot sample, they reported more contact with the other community. The Greek Cypriot sample reported higher trust, whereas the Turkish Cypriot sample reported higher prejudice. So the quantity of contact and quality of contact were significantly and positively correlated with trust and willingness for renewed cohabitation, and negatively correlated with prejudice for both groups. And so for the Greek Cypriots, age was positively correlated with trust and willingness for renewed cohabitation, but negatively correlated with prejudice. So for the Turkish Cypriots, age was negatively correlated with trust and willingness for renewed cohabitation, but positively correlated with prejudice. So what we can take away from this is it was showing how basically age played a very big role in the trust and prejudice experienced by the two communities, but in opposing directions. So for workplaces and organizations, it's important for them to mediate those different role relationships and hierarchies with age obviously in mind. So it says in many cases, younger employees are more often open and trusting of those from opposing communities or vice versa. Workplaces, they need to assess the attitudes of employees when it comes to these seniority and experience related parameters so that they can have targeted interventions.
All right, so this is interesting. Let's unpack this for a second. Why would older Greeks, wait, is this age is positive? So older Greeks are more willing to reconcile, it looks like, as a result of contact, and which is mediated by trust, than were younger Greeks and younger Turks, right? Younger Turks were more willing than older Turks. And I'm assuming, I don't know a whole lot about this region, but I'm assuming that the Greeks were sort of the dominant power over Turks, yeah? And Turks were kind of marginalized or oppressed in some way.
I believe so. I know this has been like an intractable conflict for decades.
Yeah. Okay. So
like similar to like the Palestine and like
right.
that an Israel issue where there's like pockets of them kind of like groups throughout the Cyprus as the it's an island.
Oh, so okay, gotcha. So it's like yeah, Greeks and yeah. So
but it's interesting that like the opposition with age and prejudice too, like that. I mean, I don't have is there a theory to that? Like why?
Well, I'm going to assume, and I'm sure they talked about this in the study, but I would assume that so like this has been going on for a long time. The older you are, the more experience you have in this conflict. Like it's more, I guess the older you are, the more embedded it is, right? Because it's been going on for a long time. So the people who were sort of in the dominant position are more willing to reconcile than the people who have been like sort of traumatized for many years. But the younger people in that minority have not been as traumatized, so they're more willing to reconcile, right? I would think that was what playing into it.
That makes sense to me. I'm sorry, Alexis, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was agreeing. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you could see it in different communities around the world, not just with, the Turkish and Greek Cypriots, but I mean, here in the United States, like Sarah was saying, with in Palestine, Israel. I think that, like you said, as you get older, if you're in that more marginalized community, you would probably have less willingness to work with the other side, towards the newer generations who are coming up, may want to work more towards cohabitation. So it makes sense for the Greek Cypriots, if they had a position of power, to, as they get older, realize, okay, we can integrate a little more. But I guess it falls in line, it makes sense.
Maybe the younger generation has more optimism. The older generation is like, it ain't gonna work. This has been going on for too long. Like, that kind of thing's going on.
Yeah, like they have more attachment to the narrative because they've experienced it longer, and it's just more ingrained,
And they're there's more trauma there. There's more trauma. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, that makes sense. But what they were looking at, aside from the interaction with age, it was trust and prejudice were the mediators between contact on one side and the willingness to cohabitate. So that's like that key intergroup contact thing, is like the quality and quantity of contact positively affects willingness to cohabitate, and then that is mediated by a level of trust and a lower level of prejudice. So that's a clean result, I feel like.
Right now I'm focusing on the age, like for Turkish Cypriots, the age being positively correlated with prejudice. So is that saying that, and they're not specifying like whether it's older or younger, they're just saying age plays a role in?
Well, okay, yeah. So you're saying for the chart. So when something's negatively correlated, it means as it rises, the other one goes down, essentially. So as age rises, trust and willingness go down for Turkish.
And prejudice goes up.
And prejudice goes up. So older Turks are more prejudiced and less trusting of Greeks. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So let's apply that to the workforce, right?
Yeah. Like if you saw like a team of like, I think we've done this team thing before, where it's just like there's the sales department and the IT department. IT department's this sort of small group, and they're in conflict a lot with like sales and marketing, because sales and marketing wants to do what they want, and they're bigger and they create more revenue, so they feel more valuable and they have a little more pull in the company and that kind of thing. And then so like maybe these older sales guys that have been around a long time, like, yeah, we can get along with the IT, and older IT guys are like forget it, we've tried for years, we can't get along with these guys. And then like new people come in, and the new IT guys are like maybe more optimistic. But it's interesting that we're talking the new sales guys are less optimistic, which is strange. I mean, what's going on there that like younger Greeks or younger people in the dominant group are less trusting, less willing? I wonder what that's about. Maybe competitiveness.
Or maybe that attachment to the narrative that's passed down, like just again, it being because they're part of that dominant group. So that narrative has been in their family of origin, their generation, like passed down, but like within that same kind of large group, dominant group, that narrative is passed down. So you hold on to it a little bit more, right? Like,
Yeah, well,
does that make
yeah,
sense?
well, but the older ones have had the narrative too for long. I wonder if it's like something has to do with
But it's the
like,
older.
So empathy and humility tend to grow with age. And so maybe there's like something in the young people that is a little bit more competitive and less empathetic. And they're kind of like, they're more apt to be aggressive than if like the older people that are like, I don't want to fight as much anymore if they're in the dominant. I don't know. I'm just like shooting in the wind here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think that like in the takeaway, when you look at, I think it's important not only to talk about age, but the seniority and experience related parameters. Because what Jeremy's saying a little bit,
Yeah.
which looking at like my own field, just looking at flight attendant culture in general, you'll have older ladies who are also, senior experience wise, they are the ones who are more open to like working with newer people, to where there's younger flight attendants who have that seniority over the new people who are way more competitive in a way and less likely to have that integration with newer people. So I think that empathy and experience definitely does play a factor when it comes to the workplace, because like I say, you see a lot of the older flight attendants who they're the ones who are kind of like the Greek Cypriots, where they're like, okay, I don't care about your newness. Like I'm willing to work with you. So
are there any like kind of traditional conflict factions in the airline industry? Like pilots don't get along with, someone.
It's gate agents versus flight attendants. That is the
wow,
age-old
that's
terrible relationship. But yeah.
Wow. I wonder. So okay, we should get into that later, but that's interesting. Yeah. So you could try to apply, and does one feel like they have more power than the other or something?
I would say that I guess it's a power struggle. I think the flight attendants think that they probably have a little more power, when in reality, gate agents have a lot of power over what happens. So, but I think it's more of a power struggle. I think that any conflict between actual flight attendants is based off seniority and age. But when it comes to like gate agents and flight attendants, I don't think seniority or anything that, is different with seniority between those two sides. So I think that's more just like a power struggle kind of.
Well, because I think this like the interaction that this study's talking about, there's definitely power definitely plays in, or at least perceived power definitely plays into the dynamic that we're seeing in the results. Like, if you're in the powerful, the older generation feels one way less than the younger, and then vice versa on the less powerful side. Or it's so it'd be interesting to look at in organization, like two different teams, one being more powerful than the other, and how willing to, like, it'd be cool to replicate something like this, to see if there's a way to replicate it in an organization. But it would have to be like two work teams that are like traditionally in conflict,
right?
So
I'm just thinking about how like it's along with like what we're saying, it's very different on the industry, like different groups. I'm thinking what's coming to my mind right now is like in a lot of like community-based organizations where there's multiple service providers working with said client, like youth and family services in that realm. There's a lot of like sort of, like subgroup contact or conflict with, let's say, case managers and social workers, or, like the different service providers, even some that are part of the same kind of agency organization, some that are just when they're, working together. And it's not always about seniority or age. It's like what Alexis is saying. It's just like the roles. It's just kind of gate agents, flight attendants.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it can be like there isn't like a cookie cutter kind of thing across industries, right?
It's very cool though. I mean, it'd be an interesting kind of like report if we like figured it out to like go, in this industry, these are the traditional conflict factions, in each industry. Like I was talking to a reporter yesterday that she's like, she does a lot of like articles on like the health industry. And she was saying there's this sort of traditional conflict that goes on between doctors and nurses and / nurse practitioners and their unions. And like who has power to do what and all kinds of stuff. And like there's this like ongoing thing that's always present in every hospital. So I was like, that's interesting too. Like every industry has that maybe, on some level.
Yeah, but when you bring unions into it, it's a whole different story because then it doesn't matter the industry. It's just union versus not union.
Yeah, well, and like imagine in education, administration versus teachers, right? And the teachers union gets involved, and it's always this kind of thing. But yeah, and then the unions kind of limit their ability to actually resolve conflicts on their own. They have to go through the union, which is a little bit difficult.